Just a quick friendly reminder, my book is still for sale, both signed and unsigned. Links down below, the Coffee link and Amazon link. And if you have a story you want to send my way, go to astheravendreams.com and click the button to do so. And of course, thank you. After my relationship ended with the long-term boyfriend, I fell into a pretty dark place. I spent almost 2 years living off of delivery food and takeout, and I barely left my apartment except for work, or the rare occasion I went to a friend's or family, but that was rare. I had lost all confidence in myself and let myself go, no longer caring about myself. The breakup was hard. It wasn't expected, and it took a lot out of me. I was depressed and barely recognized myself in the mirror. By November of 2023, I was finally tired of my attitude and how I was treating myself. I wanted my life back. I wanted to get out more with my friends and have fun again, so I made myself a New Year's resolution to get back into shape. I planned out meals and snacks in advance to stop myself from eating out. I joined a local gym that was 24 hours and fairly cheap. I was feeling pretty motivated with my plans. I went to the gym after work to give myself plenty of time. The first week or so was exactly what you would expect. Awkwardly fumbling with machines, trying to remember proper form from videos and feeling completely out of place. The gym was big on being judgment-free, and it showed. No one watched you or made fun of you, or at least they didn't make it obvious. But as I struggled to figure out some of the machines, that's when I noticed him. He was taller, maybe mid-30s, and definitely in better shape than myself. I kept catching him looking in my direction, and initially my insecurities kicked in hard. I thought he was definitely amused watching the fat girl struggle, and I was anticipating seeing him laugh or pointing me out to someone else. But then he smiled and winked at me, and I felt this rush of validation that I hadn't experienced since my breakup. I smiled back, but left it at that. The negative voices were telling me it was just him being nice because I caught him staring and nothing more. But the next day that I went, he was there, and he approached me while I was trying to figure out the cable machine. He walked in front of me, still keeping some distance, and asked if he could give me some tips on that machine. He told me his name was James. He then showed me some techniques and how to hold the ropes. He even asked what my goals were and suggested some workout routines. We even joked when he swore he wasn't a fitness trainer, trying to solicit services. The entire time he made eye contact with me, kept his distance, and always had a warm and encouraging smile that made me feel like maybe I could actually do this. I even had what seemed to be a possible friend to cheer me on and help hold me accountable. Looking back, I should have noticed how he always seemed to be there, no matter what time I went to the gym. Morning, afternoon, evening, somehow James was always around. But for some time, I enjoyed the attention that he showed me. He was a great-looking guy and could easily be hanging out with anyone, but he chose me. Eventually, the warm feelings he gave me did start to crumble. He started giving more unsolicited advice, but it wasn't like the helpful tips he used to give. Instead, he would come up behind me during my exercises. Like one time I was doing squats. He then put his hands on my hips to, quote, adjust my position. I froze in place. His hands lingered way too long, and I kind of felt sick to my stomach. I turned around really fast to get his hands off of me, and his once encouraging smile now looked creepy. All I could think to compare it to was a predator watching his prey. I felt more like a target than a friend or an acquaintance. That's when I really started going at different times. I went later at night, knowing he usually left at the same time as me. But when I would get there and he was there, he would linger at machines and watch me. He was already covered in sweat, telling me he had already been there for some time, but he was now staying longer, possibly because of me. I stayed by the machines close to the front, and I only used the ones where I face outward so he couldn't come up behind me anymore, but that didn't stop him. He would still walk around me, try to put his arm around the small of my back when I switched out the weights, etc. I didn't know what to do, and I felt stupid. I welcomed his company at first, but now he was crossing boundaries, and in public for that matter. I watched movies and read books, and I always knew what I would do in those situations, but then when it actually happens to you and you freeze, you don't know what you should do. You question everything you do, and when you're in a relationship similar to what I was prior to this, you question your options even more. So I just decided to avoid him altogether and started going to a different gym. I went there a few times and was starting to feel better about it, and my decision, until my stomach dropped as I saw James walk into the gym. He scanned the area like he was looking for someone. I felt sick. I was on one of the elliptical machines that faced the front, so there was no way to pretend I didn't see him, and I definitely didn't want him touching me again, so I stopped. I immediately went to the locker room and waited a few minutes before I swiftly walked out and toward the exit. That's when I heard my name. I didn't want to turn around, but I did, and sure enough, it was James. I was just walking towards my car, but I stopped and walked back towards the lit-up building, thinking I would at least be safer there than in the dark parking lot. I just made sure to keep my distance, and would take a step back every time he tried to move closer. He laughed and made a comment about, what are the odds that we would run into each other at a different gym? I made a vague comment about how it was odd, which wasn't a lie. What was his reasoning to go to a different gym? Then, his smile fell, and he just looked at me wide-eyed and said, "You're not trying to avoid me, are you, Kaylee?" I was spooked. I didn't know how to respond and how he would respond to whatever I said. I just remember giving a shaking no, and making some excuse about that one being a little easier to get to. Then he broke the creepy stare and started to laugh and said that he was just messing around with me and that he understood. I was freaking out internally. Whether it was just a joke, it seriously scared the hell out of me. He was being a creep as is with touching me. But that was just flat out scary. He then wished me a good night, and I quickly walked away towards my car. I didn't look back. I rushed to my car, keys ready to unlock it, and then quickly got in and locked the doors again. And when I looked up to where we were standing, James was still there, watching me. I still remember the chills I got watching him stare at me and smile. I stopped going to the gym altogether, not knowing what to do. At that point, I had only run into him at the gym, and I felt like there wasn't anything I could do about it either. So, my solution was to avoid the gym and figure out another method of exercising, be it a different gym altogether or just working out at home. However, that wouldn't be the last time that I saw him. I was working at a bank at the time, and while I was with a customer in my office, one of my tellers came in and told me someone was here to see me. She had a big smile on her face, which just confused me more. Who could possibly be here? I just assumed it was another customer that specifically asked for me since I was a personal banker, and asked her to tell them to wait for me in the lobby. But she stopped me and said that it was my fitness trainer. I immediately felt sick. I certainly didn't have a fitness trainer, but I had a feeling I knew who it was. I excused myself from my office, apologizing to my customer, and lo and behold, there's James, standing in my lobby, holding flowers. I never told him where I worked, so how the hell did he find out? As a few people stood by watching with smiles on their faces, I could only feel embarrassed. I finally mustered up the courage to stand my ground and asked him why he was there. He had that same smug grin and said that he missed seeing me at the gym and wanted to make sure I was sticking to my goals and workout. I told him that he needed to leave immediately and to leave me alone. I was loud enough to get the attention of the security guard who came over. I told him that he needed to go, and I watched James's face change from that friendly smile to one that told me that I would regret what I just did. I saw the people around me now trying not to make eye contact. I was so embarrassed and terrified. He had the courage to show up at my work, and for what? It's not like he even said anything romantic or asked me on a date. That felt more intimidating almost. Like an "I know where you work" type of message. Worse yet, I still didn't know what I could do. I ended up talking to my brother about it because he was a cop, and he highly suggested that I file a report and try to get a protective order. He said since he had shown up at my work and was making me as uncomfortable as he was, there was plenty of reason to do so. So, I went with him to the police station and filed a report the next day. I remember them asking questions about if he knew where I lived, or if he was ever at my place, or if he was on any of my social medias. I hadn't even thought about that, and frantically scrolled through friends and followers on what I had since I started going to the gym. I didn't find any profiles with the name James, nor did I see his picture on any of them. But what if he just didn't have a picture of himself? Or what if his profile was named something different? I didn't know what other choice I had, so I ended up deleting my Instagram and Snapchat, and did a huge cleanup on my Facebook. I was left with only family and close friends. I wasn't comfortable going back to the gyms, so I did what I could from home, buying a few weights and bands, and did my best. I didn't see him after that, thankfully. However, I did get a friend request from someone by the name of Michael. I checked out the profile first because I couldn't think of anyone I knew with the name Michael, but when I looked closer at his picture, it was definitely James. I don't know if he was using a different name, maybe his middle name, but he was wearing the same hat he always wore at the gym. I not only declined it, but I also blocked him. I had a message request too, because you can't even message me unless you are a friend, and I just deleted it, assuming it was probably him too. And that was the last time I had any sort of contact with him. It was such a surreal experience for me. I thought I just found a possible friend, someone to help me on this new journey, but he went way over some boundaries, and that was not okay. He knew very little about me. He knew my first name and my fitness goals, I guess, which consisted of saying I needed to lose weight. I didn't tell him anything about where I worked or lived, and certainly didn't give him enough information to find me on social media. So, when he showed up at my work, I was pretty creeped out. Maybe some people might think I overreacted, but to not give any indication of the reason for showing up, and the look on his face, it made the whole thing seem more malicious than good intent. I guess I'll just go back to keeping to myself, because even the seemingly nice guy who just wanted to help appeared to have other creepy intentions. And as for James, let's just never meet again. So, this story may be different from what I've heard you do before, but I thought you might still be interested in it. This doesn't have some creepy person in it, but more so, it was about my best friend and roommate, and how she almost died because of her own actions. My friend Ashley and I had been friends since middle school. From then on, we made plans to do everything together for the rest of our lives, and so far it has come true. After high school, we got our first apartment together. I was going to school and working, and Ashley was just working, not sure what she wanted to major in yet. We were doing great, However, we both enjoyed our jobs and got along so well. But one thing Ashley wasn't happy with was her body. She was a little overweight, but she honestly wasn't unhealthy. I am smaller than her and always have been, but I didn't know why. I didn't really work out or watch what I ate. I guess I just have a faster metabolism. I have 2 siblings, one that was slimmer too and one that was a little heavier, so I really didn't understand why or how I lucked out with that trait. But one thing I didn't like about Ashley was how she would compare her body to mine. She made comments all the time about wanting to lose weight and what she would do if she looked like me. I would always tell her how she was beautiful the way she was, and to make sure no matter what she chooses that it's what she wants. I also explained to her about self-acceptance and to love herself. Sorry if I seem to be making a bit of a speech. I was going to school for psychology, so I still catch myself doing that at times. My point here is that I was trying to make sure Ashley was sure that she wanted whatever she did, and wasn't doing it because she felt like she had to do it for someone else. And no matter what, I would support her and help her. So back in 2017, when Ashley made a New Year's resolution to lose weight, I agreed to get into shape with her. I could use a good muscle shape up and could do better about what I eat, which would also help Ashley. We went as far as cleaning out our fridge and pantry, getting rid of any junk. We bought some weights and bands to work out at home, and agreed to start a plan to go on walks and work out together. But, oh how quickly that seemed to crumble. It started out fine, with our plans in mind. Ashley followed several wellness influencers on Instagram. She would mention how they suggested some simple workout routine or recipes. Some recommended fasting once or twice a week. They seemed fine at first, but then it started getting more sketchy. Ashley told me about some dietary supplements they were promoting that you were supposed to take alongside your workouts to help boost metabolism, or something like that. I tried asking about the ingredients or what was in it, but she just told me that she'd already looked into it and it was all natural ingredients. Stupidly, I trusted her. I trusted that she knew what she was doing. Ashley wasn't stupid either. I knew her enough to know that she wouldn't fall into scams or gimmicks. We made fun of those MLMs all the time because her sister fell into one of them, so I didn't feel like I needed to push it any further. So, Ashley bought these supplements and started taking them. I would come home from class or work and ask her about walking or something, and she would decline, saying she already did her workout. I was doing this for her and with her, so if she didn't want to walk with me, I just didn't bother. I was just happy that she was sticking with it, and that she was becoming happier with herself, and that made me happy. But then it escalated. She would tell me every few days about how she was losing weight. She lost 2 pounds, then 5 pounds. One day she told me she was down 20 pounds. I was happy to see her glowing with pride, but I also knew that seemed to be a lot of weight in a short amount of time. I questioned her on what she was doing, and she became a little more vague. I'm just taking my supplements, eating better and exercising, is what she would tell me. But that wasn't really the complete truth, and I didn't know what to do. I was watching her weight drop. I could physically see the difference in her. Where she started with that glow and was happy for losing weight, she was now looking pale and frail. She wasn't gaining muscle mass, but was slowly looking smaller and smaller. Her clothes started to swallow her. I even tried talking to her about it, saying we should get a real gym membership. Maybe trying to focus on workouts now, instead of just weight loss. She refused, and even said that would defeat the purpose. She wanted to be skinny. She didn't want to be beefy, as she put it. I tried to explain to her that muscle was just as important so that she still had strength, but she wouldn't hear it. And while I know it had to be said, I feel like I mistakenly mentioned to her how she was losing weight too fast, and that seemed to upset her. She even made the comment that I was just upset that she was going to be skinnier than me. I was disappointed. I never cared about my size or hers, but now I was concerned about her health, and she only looked at it as jealousy. We stopped talking about her weight loss for a while. I was worried if I said any more, I would push her away. The only thing I had was knowing that she was safe if she came home every night from work. I made dinner one night, salmon and rice, and she took a fork full of the fish, and that was it. I didn't know if she was even eating any more than that. One of the breaking points came one day as I came home from work, and she was sitting on the couch. She was wearing one of her favorite sweater dresses. I remember she liked it because it hid all of her insecurities while accentuating the parts that she liked. But when I saw her in it now, I thought she had her blanket on her. It looked so big on her. I also assumed that she hadn't showered because her hair was looking stringy and oily, but when I approached to sit next to her, I realized it wasn't dirty. It was thin. She'd obviously lost a lot of hair. I knew this wasn't normal or healthy. I finally broke down. I told her that she may have been the size she wanted to be, but she did not look healthy. She looked scary. I told her how much I was worried about her, but she still didn't see it. She claimed that it was just her body adjusting to the supplements, and once her body was used to it, then it would get better. I begged her to stop taking the supplements, to at least start there, but she refused, saying it was the only thing that helped her, and then she stormed off to her room. I didn't know what to do. One day when she wasn't home, I went to her room and looked for those supplements. I thought maybe if I could find out more about them, I could scare her into stopping. Thankfully, it wasn't hard, and she kept them on top of her dresser. I took pictures of them, and the ingredients list was exactly as I had expected. A few vitamins were listed, and other things were very vague. I didn't trust it, so I went to the internet. I was terrified with what I found. Pages upon pages of complaints, scams, terrifying health stories. People died taking these things. Others had serious health issues, allergic reactions. Some were lucky and saw no results and just threw them away. I looked up their website, and it looked incredibly unprofessional. Before and after photos that were obviously and poorly edited, and testimonials that seemed fake. If you check the influencers who shared them, they had tons of comments about how it was a scam. It was like Ashley just completely ignored these and clearly did no research like she claimed. I made plans that night to confront her with all this and pretty much have an intervention. I was even ready to call her parents and tell them. But before she would even make it home, I got a call from an unknown number. It was her boss, telling me that Ashley had asked her to call me as she was being rushed to the hospital because she had collapsed at work. I rushed to the hospital to find out what happened, knowing in the back of my mind that it had to be related to her diet. I found her room, and when I entered, she broke down crying. She told me how she'd been feeling sick and weak for the past few weeks, but that she refused to believe it was because of what she'd been doing. They also came in and gave her lab results with me in the room, with her permission. They started asking about the supplements she was taking because of her levels. Those supplements contained stimulants, and something similar to a drug and/or chemical which was banned by the FDA, mind you. I don't want to mention it and give anyone any ideas. That combination had sent Ashley into a cardiac arrhythmia. Her electrolytes were dangerously low from months of purging and restriction. I learned as she talked to the doctor that the fork full of fish that she had eaten that one day was the most that she had eaten in a while. She wasn't watching what she ate, she just wasn't eating at all. She found that fasting was easier than she expected and just continued doing it, not thinking that she needed to eat. The supplements had damaged her heart, and her potassium levels were so low that they were surprised she hadn't had a heart attack sooner. She was only 26 at the time. Recovery was a long and hard road for her. After her time in the hospital, she had to go through an eating disorder treatment. She told her parents, needing all the support she could get, but she did it. She looks so much better nowadays, but for the longest time, it was the hardest thing for her, and for me, seeing her like that, and knowing that I should have done more. I should have pushed her harder about those supplements she was taking, but I felt with how angry she was getting that she would just leave, and then she would have no one at all around to help her. So, while there was no creepy person here, I just wanted to share how terrifying this was for both of us. I stood by and watched my friend wither away, too afraid to lose her to do anything. Well, she almost lost her life, obsessing with her appearance. Resolutions can be a great thing to have, and it may motivate a lot of people, but make sure you're doing it for the right reasons. Make sure that you know what you are doing, what you are taking. Those supplements and diet stuff always prey on the weak, and they're still out there. They may go by a different name, but it's all the same, and it's not worth it. Do your research before you take anything, and if you see your friend or someone you care for going down the same path, don't wait to intervene like I did. Put your foot down and tell them your thoughts and concerns, no matter how upset they may be. You could save their life. This might be a little odd, but it was still a bit creepy to me, so I wanted to share it. I grew up an only child to a single mother. It was always me and her against the world, and she still remains one of the most important people in my life. I was apparently the result of a one-night stand, but my mom grew up really fast from it too. She told my dad about it, but he wasn't interested in being a father at the time, so that was pretty much the last time they saw each other. Her parents helped her, even though they were disappointed that she did it. She raised me, she worked 2 jobs, and eventually got a place all her own. She even got her GED while I was in high school. It was funny because there were some nights that we studied together. I spent the first 28 years of my life not knowing who my dad was beyond a first name. Closer to my 30s, thinking more about my own life, I finally wanted to at least learn about my paternal side of my family. I didn't know any of them. Not even potential grandparents, aunts, uncles, nobody. With my mom's blessing, I started tracking down my dad. And no kidding, the easiest way for me to find him of all options was Facebook. My mom reached back in her memories and pictures, and once she got a last name, I was able to find him through his older sister, my aunt, who also had a Facebook. From there, I sent him a request and a message explaining who I was, and said that I just wanted to get to know him. I wasn't in it for past child support. To my surprise, he actually responded and said that he would love to. He said he was actually looking for me too. We talked a lot on Facebook, telling him about my life, growing up, what I did for a living, the normal catching up kind of questions. I even sent him some photos of myself and my little dog. We even went out for coffee one day and actually caught up, and it was just really nice. It didn't even occur to me how much I would realize I missed out on until I actually got to talk to him. He did all the same things my mom did. He laughed when I talked about things I cared about. He even made eye contact and paid attention when I was venting. He even mentioned how proud he was of the things I've accomplished, such as graduating high school, going to college, and working in business. Even on Facebook, he would comment on all my posts and photos about how proud he was, how beautiful I turned out, and I just felt good about having him in my life. There was no ill will for him not being there. I thought it was very mature of them both, to be honest, with what they wanted, and I thank them both for that. But then, as I rang in the new year of 2018, I was pretty well over Facebook and the drama surrounding it. There were a few family members on my mom's side, cousins I grew up with, that were constantly causing fights and unnecessary drama. Then, there was some work stress that kept seeming to find its way to my page, even though I had kept a lot of people from work separate from my Facebook page. So, I made a final post at the end of December saying I was taking a break from all social media, like a detox, if you will. It had become mostly stress and drama, so I made the decision to back out of it. I planned on staying off of them for at least 3 months, maybe even longer depending on what I saw or heard around me. In my post, I made it clear that I would have no access to them, as I was planning on deleting the apps too, and suggested that if anyone needed to get a hold of me, to call or text me. Those that didn't have my number were the ones I was avoiding anyways. My dad was included in those that did have my number though, so I wasn't worried about that. About 2 weeks into January, I got a text from an unknown number that said, "Why aren't you posting? Are you okay?" Turns out, it was my father. He'd gotten a new number and I wasn't aware. I texted him Happy New Year and he never responded, but I just assumed that maybe that was him. His messages were typically pretty short and to the point, so I just assumed he wasn't going to respond to it. He told me that he had to get a new number right before the new year, and he hadn't told me, so I didn't have his new number. I then reminded him about my break from social media, so if he wanted to talk to me, he would have to call or text me. The only thing I got back was a thumbs up emoji. That's what I meant, in text form. He was the man of few words. A few days later, I was getting gas on my way to work, when I heard someone call my name. I looked over, and to my surprise, it was my dad. He was living about 45 minutes away, so I would never have expected to run into him there. He asked what I was doing, and I said that I was heading into work. I remember asking him the same thing, and he just kind of skirted around the question, just mentioning that he was in the area. I went in to grab a drink and a snack for my lunch, after telling him I was heading to work, but he followed me around the entire time. I would look up at him, eyebrows raised, thinking he was going to say something, but he never did. Just smiled and watched me pick out my items. When I approached the counter to pay, he put his hand over my purse and held out a card, offering to pay for my stuff. He said that he wanted to pay for his girl's treats since he was never able to when I was a kid. It was kind of weird, but I brush it off as him legitimately wanting to pay for something, I guess. We went back outside, and he followed me to my car until I hugged him and said that I needed to go. He wished me a good day at work, and I got in to leave. The whole interaction just seemed really awkward to me. It was awkward running into someone you know as is, but he just seemed to make it a bit more weird. But I did let it go. But here's the thing. I kept running into him around town. He was at the grocery store that I went to, another gas station, and even a fast food place. I rarely ate at this place, but I was craving something, so the odds of us both being there was even less. But every time I ran into him, he did the same thing. He offered to pay for my stuff, refusing to let me, actually, and kept calling me his baby girl. I was never the type to like pet names. My mom called me by my nickname and Pumpkin, but Even she stopped when I told her I didn't like it. So, being called that, it made me really uncomfortable. I even told him he didn't need to do that, but he insisted, saying he needed to make up for lost time. So again, I just let it go. Then, the last straw for me was when I went on a date. Someone I worked with introduced me to a friend of theirs, and we had started talking and texting. We decided on a date and met at a nice restaurant. Kent was very sweet and funny, and I was kind of falling for him that night and having a great time. But out of nowhere, Kent was looking at me as I talked, and then I saw his face change to curiosity, and his eyes went over my shoulder. I looked back and I was shocked to see my dad walking up behind me. He looked a little cleaner and put together than how he was normally dressed, but I also noticed that he was puffing out his chest and had a pretty serious look as he stared at Kent, like he was sizing him up. Now I was more annoyed than anything. I asked what he was doing there, and he said that he came for dinner. Waiting for him to point out a table he was sitting at, but instead, he pulled out the chair next to me and sat down. He shook Kent's hand and introduced himself. Then, he called me his, quote, precious baby girl again, and I cringed. I was so embarrassed as he seemed to interrogate poor Kent. Thankfully, he was nice about it, and answered some of his questions, but I could tell that he was uncomfortable with the whole thing. We hadn't even placed our order yet, we just got our drinks. I started pulling cash out of my wallet, ready to get the hell out of there, but as expected, my dad stopped me. I looked at Kent with wide eyes and made a comment that we would miss our movie and that we should leave. Thank God he caught on quickly and jumped up with me. He shook my dad's hand again, and he looked at him and said to have me home by 10, and no funny business. I was mortified and angry. Why the hell was he there? Did he live close by now? And why did it seem like he was following me? I remember telling myself to call him when I was home to go off on him and to leave with Kent, hoping he didn't want to run away from me and never see me again. By the next morning, I had a text from my friend with screenshots of my Facebook. My dad had tagged me in multiple posts with those cheesy daughter stock photos with quotes. He'd made multiple posts on my wall. Where's my baby girl? Why won't you answer my messages? Are you mad at your daddy? Just want to make sure you're safe, baby. I miss my princess. Why was he being so creepy about all of this? He knew I wasn't on Facebook anymore, and posting all of that was embarrassing, as everyone could see it. I unfortunately logged back into my Facebook and changed my settings so people couldn't post on my stuff or tag me without me approving it first. Then, I saw that I had over 50 messages, and they were all from him. They started out normal. They went to similar things I saw on my wall, and then he sent me so many articles on child abductions, kids found dead, child trafficking stories, statistics. It was all just disturbing. Who sends that kind of stuff? To find that many articles and post them all the same day, you had to be seeking them out. So, I messaged him back, and it became pretty long, asking what the hell was wrong with him. Telling him to stop because it was getting creepy and embarrassing. And his only response was about how this is why fathers worry, and this is what happens when daughters don't stay in touch. I was a grown adult, almost in my 30s, and he was treating me like a child. I told him that he needed to stop, or I was done with him. Apparently, he took that as a challenge, and continued doing it. He even posted pictures on his page of my house with the text, "My baby girl's home. Hope everything's okay there, haven't heard from her. which made more people reach out to me asking what was wrong. After talking to my mom about it, I got the courage to finally cut ties. I called him, and I told him his behavior was scary and overwhelming. I told him he was becoming the opposite of what I was wanting out of this relationship, so I was done. I even removed and blocked him from Facebook so he couldn't tag or message me anymore. A few days later, I found a letter in my mailbox that was handwritten and folded up. It wasn't mailed. It was dropped in my mailbox. It was from my dad saying how ungrateful I was, and that I should be thankful to have a dad like him who cared so much, and how much of a terrible person my mother was. I just threw it in the trash, and that was the last time he made contact with me directly. But I heard he still made a lot of weird posts about me. Sometimes I wonder if maybe it was my fault, striking up a conversation on Facebook and then cutting off social media. But he still had a way to contact me. I even told him directly and made a post about it. And then I realized that he couldn't respect my basic boundaries and wishes. If he thought he was entitled to my attention 24/7, when he wanted nothing to do with me as a child, then he wasn't really trying to have a relationship with me. It felt more like he just wanted to possess me, control my every move, and be that overbearing father. I really didn't want that. Turns out, that detox from social media did more for me than I expected, but at least I found out sooner rather than allowing it to drag out. Now, I understand that some things are just better left alone. I did something very stupid, and I would like to share it with you all in the hopes that you won't make the same mistake as me. I had spent 3 years of my life basically becoming one with my couch. Due to the pandemic, my job became full and permanently remote, and I got a little too comfortable not leaving my house. And that's practically what I did between 2020 and 2023. My once active lifestyle became a distant memory as I navigated life between my bedroom and my home office, with occasional trips to the kitchen and bathroom. By the end of 2023, I was sick of those four walls. So, my New Year's resolution for 2024 was to get back to being active. I used to hike a lot. I had a lot of gear and even used to blog about it. So, I told myself that I was going to get back into it. I wanted to start walking weekly and take as many hiking trips as I could. But before anyone questions this, I live far from the US. I live where January is peak summer and the trails are beautiful, so January was my time to get back into it. I pulled out my gear to make sure it was all in good condition still, and determined what I needed to replace. I did some research, or so I thought, on some locations and picked what was labeled as an intermediate trail about an hour out from where I lived. In my mind, I was still the same person who used to do 15-kilometer hikes every weekend. I ignored the fact that my only exercise for the past 3 years had pretty much been going to the grocery store or the mailbox. I got to the trail around 9 a.m., and it was already hitting 35 degrees, about 95 Fahrenheit for you Americans. I had packed what I thought was enough water, 2 750 milliliter bottles. I read that you should drink about 500 milliliters per hour of hiking. The trail was supposed to take about 3 hours, so the math seemed simple enough. I was also a pretty big water drinker, so I was confident that I would be okay. My first kilometer felt great. I was proud of myself for actually getting out there and sticking to it. I had missed it. The tall trees provided patches of shade, and there was even a light breeze. I felt unstoppable, like I was finally taking my once active life back. The energy was coming back to me, and I was already thinking about my next hike and where I wanted to go. By the second kilometer, my shirt was soaked through with sweat, but I pushed on. I kept thinking about all the motivational things I got from my dad, from my sister, and even my friends that were encouraging me to do this. Even as I started getting tired, I told myself that it was just because I was getting back to it, and I just had to push through the pain and exhaustion, and I would eventually get that second wind. Around the third kilometer, things started going wrong. I noticed my breaths were more like short gasps, and my legs felt super heavy. Even when I was hiking frequently, I would be tired afterwards, but not like that. My legs felt like cement, and it became difficult to walk more than a few steps without having to stop to catch my breath. I had already finished with one of the bottles of water and was halfway through the second. The trail was getting steeper with a lot of loose rocks that made it even harder to walk up. Part of me thought that I should just turn back. That way I could at least get rest under the shade of the trees, but then I also felt like doing that would be admitting defeat, and there was no way that my ego would let me do that on my first day. I don't remember exactly when I thought I was in danger, but I remember starting to get disoriented. The trees were all looking the same. I couldn't recall if I'd passed unique boulders before or not. Was I going in circles? My vision was getting fuzzy around the edges, and my skin had stopped sweating. A bad sign I vaguely remembered from when I took first aid and read about when I got into hiking. Then the last thing I remembered was trying to sit down and completely missing the rock that I was aiming for. I fell backwards and crumpled to the ground. I remember lying there. My heart was pounding so hard that I could feel it in my gums. I tried reaching for my bag, not knowing what I would do when I got to it anyways. I didn't really get service out there, and I was out of water. I guess maybe it was a comfort at the time. Either way, I couldn't reach it because of how heavy my arms felt. I don't know how long I was there lying on the ground in the middle of nowhere. I remember drifting in and out, seeing the sun move. Because of this, I was no longer in the patch of shade that I'd collapsed in. At that moment, I was terrified. I thought I was going to fry there, and that was it. Maybe someone would find me before I got too bad. But then I heard footsteps on the trail. I wanted to look for them, to call out for help, but my body betrayed me. I could barely turn my head to look for them. I couldn't even keep my eyes open. Then I felt the cooling on my face like I was once again in the shade. I opened my eyes and saw someone standing over me. Some older man. He said something, but I either didn't understand it or he said it quietly. I couldn't quite make it out. Then I felt my head being lifted and something hitting my lips. Finally, I could make out the voice. They kept saying, "Small sips, open up," and similar things. I was drinking something sweet, and it was the best thing I had ever tasted at that moment. Then I felt my head go back down, and I felt my body being dragged. All I could think about at that time was all those true crime podcasts. I couldn't move my body, and now I was being dragged somewhere. That was how people disappeared, right? If not for the heat or dehydration, this was how I was going to die. My mind was in a weird place, and I was clearly thinking irrationally. I don't know how long I was in and out at that point, but when I finally came to, I saw an older man sitting next to me eating something and reading a book. He looked over at me and explained that I had heat exhaustion and was probably close to a heat stroke. Not to mention, I was dehydrated. He gave me a pretty simple but stern talking to about not overexerting yourself and bringing plenty of water. He then gave me the rest of the bottle of what he had me sipping on, which had an electrolyte mix in it. He sat there with me a little while longer, and we got to talking about what happened. I explained my resolution and what I had done. He laughed. Not in a mean way, but agreed that it was good of me to get back out there, but that I went about it the wrong way. I knew he was right. I had pushed it. I should have started easier, and I definitely should have overpacked on water. I messed up, and it really could have cost me my life. I ended up walking the rest of the trail with that man, and he gave me another bottle of water and something salty to snack on. He told me how that trail was one of his favorites, and that he was out there nearly weekly since he had retired. I was incredibly thankful that he was, too. No one else passed us, so I easily could have died on that trail. Once we were back at the entrance, he asked if I was okay to drive, and offered to take me to a nearby hospital to get checked out first. But I declined, not wanting to take up any more of his time. I did go to the hospital, and they made sure that I didn't have a heat stroke, and had plenty of fluids in me. They told me I was incredibly lucky that the man had found me too, because they had a few people come in from heat-related conditions. It wasn't until then that it all really hit me. I had been out there on the trails for about 6 hours. That man took it slow with me. He even stopped to make sure I was okay and could move again before we started walking. Hell, he could have left me or done worse, but he was too good for any of that. And for that, I will always be thankful. From there, I dialed it back a bit. I started on some easier trails and packed plenty of water, or went somewhere that had places to refill your water. Now I'm back to hiking as I normally do, but now I also have a better understanding of signs that could lead to something more serious. That way, I can stop it before it happens. Whether it's to myself or someone that I'm hiking with. So, to anyone else out there starting on a similar journey or goal, go easy on yourself. If you're making even the smallest difference, it's still progress. So don't immediately push yourself. Respect the fact that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is know your limits and try again another day. So that, my friends, was some interesting and scary New Year's resolution stories. More like New Year's resolution horror stories, right? Not necessarily scary New Year's resolution stories, but stories that were about New Year's resolutions that were horrifying in some way, shape, or form. Not everything that's horrifying or horror is necessarily scary, and I think that's something to remember that some people tend to forget. Maybe I'm wrong entirely, I don't know. I have no idea. Anyways, yeah, so some New Year's resolution stories. Topic I've never done before, but I had a few stories and found them, and I thought they were interesting, so it sounded like a good idea at the time. If it wasn't a good idea, well, I'm sorry. To me, it was. Who's to say it wasn't a good idea, though? Me. That's who. Not you. Maybe you, if you want to. You can. Anyways, hopefully y'all enjoyed the stories. If you did, please do hit that like button. If you're new to the channel and liked what you heard, consider subscribing, and feel free to leave me a comment down below my video. Let me know what you thought, how things are going for you. How things are going for you, so I'm trying to say. How your week is going, I guess. I don't know. You can also super thanks, which is a tip to the channel. You can click the links down below, which are a Coffee link and an Amazon link at a.co link. Both those links will take you to pages for my book, my recently released psychological thriller novel that I wrote. The Coffee link, ko-fi, is available for limited copies right now. I think I have about 30 left as of the time of this recording. So if you want one, might want to hop on it. If there's enough demand, like if I hit 90, I may buy a few more. Not sure how long I'm going to do that. I'm probably going to keep some on stock at all times, though, just because I know people might want to buy it later, so I don't know. The response has been amazing, and I appreciate it, but if you want one, might want to act fast. Just saying. My phone just buzzed. Sorry about that. You can also listen on other platforms, such as Audible, Pandora, Apple Podcasts, all those. You can sign up for Patreon or memberships, get early access to content like this. And yeah, I think that's kind of everything. If I forgot something, it probably wasn't important. But all that said, my friends, hope you're having a beautiful week and a beautiful day so far. Hope I see you again here very soon. Until then, remember that you are loved, you are valid, you are important, you are the best you that you can be. Do not forget it, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Until next time, much love, and of course, sleep well.